When the bridge snapped under Karen's BMW, the sound wasn't like in movies. It wasn't a clean crash or a single heroic moment. It was a slow, grinding groan that made the air vibrate before the timbers gave way. Her headlights tilted toward the creek, and for a fraction of a second, the reflection of her horrified face hovered on the water before the splash swallowed everything. I remember standing there on the opposite bank, my bridge closed sign half bent beside me, thinking, she really did it. She actually ignored every single warning. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The bridge had been my personal headache since the day I bought the lakefront property 3 years ago. It wasn't much, just a narrow timber span crossing the creek that cut through my land. It led to my private drive and the small cul-de-sac shared by 3 homes, mine included. The HOA didn't technically own it, but that didn't stop them from acting like they did. The bridge had been built back in the 70s, long before the HOA existed, but try telling that to the new president, Karen Dempsey. Karen was a perfectionist with a clipboard and the social subtlety of a hornet. The first time we met, she was measuring mailbox heights with a ruler. I said hello, and she looked up like I'd interrupted a sacred ritual. "You're the one who bought the right property," she said. "Not a question, a diagnosis. You'll need to repaint that fence. It's not HOA compliant." I pointed out that the fence wasn't under HOA jurisdiction. She frowned like I'd spoken blasphemy. "Everything in this neighborhood is under the HOA," she declared. "We have standards." That was Karen's favorite word, standards. The bridge didn't meet hers. I'd already noticed the old timbers sagging, so I'd hired a contractor to inspect it. The verdict was clear: unsafe for heavy vehicles. The supports were rotted out from years of floodwater, and the weight rating had dropped to nearly 0. So I did what any responsible homeowner would do: I closed it. I put up heavy steel posts at both ends, mounted bright orange warning signs, and strung reflective tape across. The contractor planned to start repairs in 2 weeks. Until then, everyone could use the alternate access road that looped around the hill. It added maybe 2 minutes of driving. That was fine with everyone except Karen. She called the first day the bridge was blocked. "You can't just close a community bridge without board approval," she snapped. I explained, again, that it wasn't community property. It was part of my parcel, maintained by me since the previous owner deeded it that way. "The HOA records don't show that," she said. "So until I see proof, I'll consider it shared infrastructure. Remove your barriers immediately." I told her she was welcome to come look at the deed. She declined. "I don't need to," she said. "I'm the HOA president." By day 2, she'd escalated. Someone, I won't name names, but let's just say she had a very specific handwriting style, tore down my signs. I put up new ones, this time reinforced with steel stakes. The next morning, they were gone again. I set up a trail camera facing the bridge. The footage was beautiful. There she was, flashlight in hand, her little dog tugging on its leash, pulling up my caution tape and tossing it into the creek like it had personally offended her. I printed a still from the video and taped it to the post. Underneath I wrote, "Smile, you're on camera." That didn't go over well. The next afternoon, I found her waiting at the end of my driveway, arms crossed, hair pulled back so tight I swear it changed her facial structure. "You're harassing me," she said. "Recording me without consent." I explained that recording trespassers on my property was perfectly legal. Her response was to threaten an HOA fine for defacing common areas. I reminded her that the bridge wasn't common. She smiled. The kind of smile people give right before they say something stupid. "We'll see about that." 2 days later, the HOA held an emergency meeting about my bridge. I didn't attend. I didn't need to. My neighbor Sam, who's lived here since the 80s, texted me a play-by-play. Apparently, Karen insisted the bridge was a critical community access point and accused me of infringing on collective rights. Sam told her the HOA had no jurisdiction. She countered by saying, "Then why have I been using it for years?" That line stuck with me. Because the thing about Karen was, she wasn't malicious for the sake of it. She was obsessed with control. Losing even a sliver of authority, especially to someone who didn't play along, drove her insane. The next weekend, I came home from running errands and found the barricades gone again. This time, the steel posts had been unscrewed. Someone had clearly come prepared. My camera? Gone. Only the mount remained, snapped clean. I called the sheriff's office. They took a report, but without video, there wasn't much they could do. Looks like vandalism, the deputy said. If you catch them again, call us right away. That night, rain started, hard, relentless, soaking. The creek swelled by morning, and the bridge sagged visibly under the weight of debris pushing against it. I stood there watching the water eat at the supports, feeling equal parts dread and inevitability. I replaced the barriers again, this time with a full metal fence and new warning boards that read, "Danger, bridge unsafe." That same afternoon, I saw Karen drive by, slow and deliberate. She stared at me through the window, lips pursed. I could practically hear her thoughts. You think you can tell me what to do? 3 hours later, I was in my workshop when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Then a metallic screech. I looked through the window and saw her silver BMW inching toward the bridge, the fence pushed aside. She must have removed the bolts with a wrench. She had one in her hand. I ran outside shouting, "Stop! The bridge is closed." But she didn't stop. She rolled down her window and yelled back, "I have a meeting. I don't take orders from you." Then she gunned it. The car made it halfway before the timbers let go. There was this sharp crack, not loud but deep, like bones breaking under strain. Then everything sagged. Her front tires dropped, the rear spun, and for a moment the BMW hung there, headlights pointed skyward. Then the entire deck folded inward, dumping her into the muddy water below. Silence followed, except for the hiss of the engine and the rain. I called 911, already explaining what happened before they picked up. "Car in the creek off Timberline Road," I said. "Driver's alive, I think." I grabbed a rope from the shed and ran down the bank. She'd already climbed onto the roof, drenched, makeup running, screaming about how I'd set her up. When the deputies arrived, she told them I'd sabotaged the bridge. I handed them the stack of contractor reports, dated warnings, photos, and emails from the HOA. The deputy glanced at her, then at the wrecked BMW, and said quietly, "Ma'am, looks like you ignored the signs." I didn't laugh, not then. But part of me wanted to. Later that night, as the tow truck hauled her car out of the creek, Karen stood there shivering under an umbrella, refusing to look at me. She didn't apologize. She didn't even speak. But the next morning, I found a note in my mailbox. It wasn't signed, but I recognized the handwriting. "I'll see you at the next HOA meeting." And that's when I knew this wasn't over. The bridge collapse should have been the end of it. Any reasonable person would have taken that as a wake-up call, maybe even a humbling one. But Karen didn't do reasonable. She did vindictive. Within 48 hours of the accident, she'd reappeared like a bad sequel, except this time she wasn't muddy and panicked. She was polished, composed, and carrying a clipboard like a weapon. It started Monday morning. I was out front stacking lumber for the replacement bridge when she strolled up the driveway in heels, of all things, stepping over wet soil like the ground itself should be honored she was walking on it. She didn't even say hello. "You're liable," she said flatly, "for the damage to my car." I paused mid-stack. "The bridge was closed, Karen. That doesn't matter. It's on community land, which makes you responsible for maintaining it safely for everyone's use. It's my land. I've shown you the deed, the surveys, the photos." "I've filed a formal claim," she interrupted. "You'll hear from the HOA's legal representative." I wanted to laugh, but her tone was so earnest it came out more like a sigh. "You called your HOA lawyer?" "Correction," she said. "Our HOA lawyer." Then she turned, leaving the faint smell of perfume and scorched ego behind her. That was the start of Karen's next campaign, a bureaucratic war fought entirely through letters, fines, and meetings. Every day that week, something new arrived in my mailbox. First came a notice of violation for creating a hazard within community boundaries. Then a $500 emergency fine for obstructing HOA access routes. 2 days later, another one, this time for improper signage. By Friday, I had a small stack of papers that could have fueled a campfire. My wife, Rachel, told me to ignore them. "She's trying to get a rise out of you," she said. "You're feeding her by responding." "I'm not feeding her," I said. "I'm documenting her insanity." Rachel smirked. "That's still feeding her." She wasn't wrong. Karen thrived on attention. The more I resisted, the more elaborate her moves became. When she realized fines weren't working, she moved to social warfare. She started calling emergency board meetings at her house, conveniently timed for when I was working on the property. From across the creek, I'd see a cluster of neighbors gathered in her yard, sipping lemonade while she gestured toward my land like she was briefing the UN on human rights violations. Then came the rumors. Apparently, I'd destroyed community infrastructure and endangered lives by failing to maintain the bridge properly. She even claimed I'd removed safety inspections to hide structural fault. The kicker came from my neighbor Sam. "She's telling people your insurance won't cover the collapse because you admitted guilt," he said, chuckling. "She's even showing them a copy of your inspection report like it's a smoking gun." I wasn't angry, not yet. Mostly, I was impressed by her creativity. It takes real talent to twist the truth so tightly it strangles itself. Still, I knew better than to underestimate her. Karen was the kind of person who'd turn a neighbor dispute into a full-blown crusade if it meant proving she was right. So, I decided to stop reacting and start planning. First step: rebuild the bridge legally and document everything. I met with the county inspector, walked him through the damage, and filed a construction permit under my property's parcel ID. The paperwork was airtight. Then I hired a contractor, not the cheapest but the most meticulous, to rebuild it with steel reinforcements and load-bearing certification. The irony? When it was done, the bridge would be safer than anything the HOA had ever built. While the crew worked, I posted a laminated copy of the permit at the site and added motion-activated security cameras on both ends, each one streaming live footage to my phone and backed up to the cloud. I wasn't taking chances this time. For a few blissful days, Karen disappeared. No phone calls, no letters, no drive-bys. I almost let myself believe it was over. Then, on the fourth evening, my contractor called me. "Hey, we've got a problem." "What kind of problem?" He hesitated. "Someone filed a stop-work order." I blinked. "What?" "County office says there's been a complaint, claims we're altering a community structure without HOA consent. They're sending an inspector tomorrow to verify." I didn't need a crystal ball to know who filed it. Sure enough, the next morning, Karen showed up with 2 HOA board members in tow, both middle-aged men who looked like they'd rather be golfing. She carried a binder thick enough to stop a bullet. "Good morning," she chirped. "I see you're proceeding with unapproved construction." "Approved by the county," I said. "Not by the HOA. Because the HOA doesn't own this land." She smiled sweetly. "We'll let the county decide that." When the inspector arrived, I handed him the property survey and permit document. He flipped through them, nodded once, and turned to Karen. "Ma'am, this parcel's private. You don't have jurisdiction here." Her smile faltered. "That can't be right." "It's right," he said. "Unless your HOA wants to pay for the repairs, I suggest you let the owner handle it." For a moment, she looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. "We'll be reviewing our bylaws," she said stiffly, then stormed off, her 2 companions scrambling to keep up. It was glorious. But Karen wasn't the kind to lose gracefully. A week later, she pivoted to Phase 3, weaponizing public image. It started with an HOA newsletter, a glossy, 4-page PDF she emailed to every resident. The front page featured a smiling photo of her standing near the ruined bridge site, captioned, "Community Leadership Responds to Infrastructure Crisis." The article underneath was pure fiction. According to Karen, the bridge collapse had disrupted vital community access and placed residents at risk. She even hinted that the HOA was exploring reimbursement options for affected parties. Translation: she wanted someone, me, to pay. I forwarded the newsletter to my lawyer, who responded with a short message. Document everything. Do not engage. So I didn't. At least, not directly. Instead, I decided to remind Karen what happens when she ignores boundaries. Literally and metaphorically. One night, I set up new motion lights on the bridge and replaced the old bridge closed boards with fresh ones that read, "Private access. Trespassers will be reported." I angled the signs so that anyone crossing from her side would have to read them head-on. The next morning, she called the sheriff's office to report me for harassment lighting. When the deputy arrived, he took one look at the bridge, then at her, and said, "Ma'am, these lights are within property limits." He's allowed. She wasn't amused. But what really broke her composure came 2 days later when she tried to pull another stunt, driving her replacement car, a brand-new Audi, halfway across the unfinished bridge during construction to test stability. My contractor caught her on camera, and when confronted, she said she didn't believe it was actually closed. That footage became my insurance policy. I sent it straight to my lawyer, who filed a trespass warning with the sheriff's office. From that moment on, Karen was officially barred from setting foot on my property without permission. You'd think that would stop her. It didn't. A week later, she took the fight online. Someone, I wonder who, posted on the community Facebook group, "Certain residents are endangering public safety by restricting access to shared property." The comments exploded. Half the neighborhood sided with her, half called her out. It turned into a digital civil war. Then, out of nowhere, she made her biggest move yet, a lawsuit. The papers arrived on a rainy Thursday. She was suing me for damages to her BMW, emotional distress, and negligent endangerment. The filing claimed I had intentionally sabotaged a public bridge, failed to warn residents of imminent danger, and used intimidation tactics. It was absurd. My lawyer called it the most creative use of legal stationery he'd ever seen. Still, lawsuits mean time, stress, and money, exactly what she wanted. I wasn't about to give her that satisfaction. So I countered, quietly, strategically. My lawyer filed a motion to dismiss backed by property deeds, inspection reports, and the sheriff's trespass record. Meanwhile, I sent certified copies of everything to the HOA board, along with a polite cover letter. Given the ongoing litigation, I advised the HOA to cease interference pending resolution. Any further actions will be considered contributory liability. It was professional, non-threatening, and deadly effective. Within days, the other board members distanced themselves from her. Sam told me she'd tried to call an emergency meeting and nobody showed. By the time the county finished rebuilding my bridge, now steel-reinforced, flood-resistant, and glorious, Karen's power had begun to crack. But the woman wasn't done. She had one last card to play. And it would be the most dangerous yet. You know that feeling when you can sense someone plotting against you, even when everything's quiet. That's what life became after Karen's lawsuit fizzled. The court dismissed it almost instantly once the property records and video evidence came out. She had to eat her own filing fees, and for 2 glorious weeks, the neighborhood was peaceful. Too peaceful. When people like Karen go silent, they're not defeated. They're regrouping. I noticed the first sign one Thursday morning. My contractor, Vince, showed up looking uneasy. "We've got a problem," he said, flipping through his clipboard. "County sent a notice about your culvert permit. Says someone filed a complaint claiming you diverted drainage illegally." That someone wouldn't happen to have blonde hair and a personal vendetta, would it? I asked. He smirked. The name's redacted, but I'd bet my truck on it. The accusation was nonsense. I hadn't diverted anything, just reinforced the old drainage under the bridge to handle stormwater. But the county had to investigate. That meant an inspection, a temporary work freeze, and at least a week of delay. That same day, I saw Karen out walking her little white dog, right past the creek, phone in hand, pretending not to look at the construction site. She didn't wave. She just smirked. Rachel, ever the peacemaker, tried to convince me to ignore her. She's miserable, and misery needs an audience. Stop giving her one. I wanted to, but every time I saw that self-satisfied look, my blood pressure spiked. So instead of ignoring her, I doubled down on legality. I printed every permit, every email, every inspection report, and compiled them in a binder thicker than a dictionary. Karen wanted a war of paperwork? Fine. I could play that game. The county inspector, a weary-looking guy named Bill, arrived that Friday. He walked the site, checked the culvert, and shook his head. This complaint's a waste of time. Everything's to code. You're not the first one to say that, I told him. He chuckled. I'm guessing your neighbor's the type who alphabetizes her spice rack and corrects the weather? Exactly. He filed his report that afternoon, complaint dismissed. But instead of relief, what I felt was inevitability. This wasn't about a bridge or a culvert. This was about control. Karen had lost hers, and she couldn't stand it. The next week, she went for the nuclear option, politics. The HOA held its annual election that Saturday at the community clubhouse. Normally, it was a snooze fest where retirees argued about trash pickup times. But this time, the place was packed. I showed up out of morbid curiosity, standing quietly in the back while Karen took the floor like a televangelist. My fellow residents, she began, voice syrupy smooth, recent events have shown us how fragile our community's safety truly is. We've endured property damage, legal confusion, and personal animosity, all because of one resident's refusal to cooperate. A murmur rippled through the room. She didn't say my name, but she didn't have to. She continued, I propose we amend our bylaws to include all access structures and connecting land as shared HOA property. This will prevent future private disputes from endangering us again. In other words, she wanted to seize my bridge, legally. I raised my hand. Question, I said, stepping forward. If that passes, who pays for maintenance? Karen didn't hesitate. The HOA, of course. Interesting, I said. Because the HOA's broke. You spent $12,000 on a decorative gate last quarter. That got a laugh from the crowd. Karen's smile tightened. Also, I added, my property line predates your bylaws. You'd need a 2/3 majority and county approval for eminent domain. Good luck explaining that. The laughter turned into applause. Karen's face froze like someone had unplugged her. She moved to adjourn the meeting early, but the damage was done. The amendment failed. That night, I sat on my porch with a cold beer, watching the moon glint off the new steel bridge. For the first time in months, I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd give up. Then the next morning, I woke to sirens. 2 fire trucks, 1 ambulance, and 3 sheriff's cruisers lined the road near the bridge. I ran down barefoot, heart pounding, only to find chaos. One of the wooden retaining walls near the creek had collapsed, blocking water flow. The backed-up current had flooded Karen's front yard. She was standing knee-deep in muddy water, screaming at the fire chief. He did this. He sabotaged it. The chief turned to me, exasperated. You the property owner? Yeah, I said, still catching my breath. He gestured toward the fallen wall. Looks like soil erosion. Nothing criminal. But she's insisting you caused it. Karen spun toward me, eyes blazing. You redirected the runoff to flood my house. I stared at her, stunned. Karen, you think I control rain now? This is retaliation. Before I could respond, one of the deputies spoke quietly into his radio, then looked up. Ma'am, the erosion originated from your side of the creek. Your landscaping crew built too close to the edge. Karen's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. That's impossible. The deputy pointed to the debris pattern. Gravity says otherwise. I'll never forget the sound she made then, not a scream, but a tiny, strangled gasp. That was the day the HOA started questioning her leadership. By the time summer rolled around, the bridge gleamed like something out of a magazine spread: steel guardrails, pressure-treated decking, solar-powered marker lights along the side. It was a work of art, the kind of construction project that makes neighbors stop their cars just to gawk. The irony was, most of them didn't even have permission to drive over it. The private access-only sign at each end made that clear. Most respected it. Karen, of course, did not. The lawsuit she'd filed against me had collapsed faster than her BMW, dismissed with prejudice after the county records confirmed ownership. Her lawyer, apparently hired through the HOA's community fund, had quit the case midstream, likely realizing he'd been drafted into a personal vendetta masquerading as civic duty. But Karen wasn't humiliated, she was galvanized. She reemerged in public like a politician after a scandal, smiling, self-righteous, and louder than ever. It started subtly. HOA newsletters began referring to me as a non-cooperative homeowner. At the next community barbecue, which Rachel and I foolishly attended, Karen gave a little speech about the importance of harmony and residents who choose to isolate themselves from collective responsibility. Every eye drifted toward me as she said it. Rachel squeezed my hand. She's baiting you. Don't bite. I smiled through clenched teeth. Oh, I'm past biting. I'm plotting. I had, by this point, amassed a small digital archive of Karen's greatest hits: videos, emails, HOA memos, and voice recordings of her leaving passive-aggressive voicemails. I wasn't planning to use them, but I liked knowing they existed. It was my insurance policy, my invisible moat. Then, one night in mid-July, the war reignited in the most ridiculous way imaginable: paint. I came home late from work to find the bridge railings splattered with bright pink streak. Not just random vandalism, deliberate, swirling designs, like someone had tried to beautify the structure. At first, I thought maybe some teens had gotten creative. But then I saw the note taped to the post at the entrance. Your bridge is an eyesore. The HOA Color Palette Committee has chosen a more welcoming shade. I could practically hear her voice in every loop of handwriting. I called the sheriff. Again. The deputy who arrived, same one who'd handled the BMW incident, looked tired but amused. She really doesn't quit, huh? She thinks this is her property, I said. He shrugged. File another vandalism report. I'll swing by her place to chat. When he left, I stood there staring at the pink paint glistening under the porch light. Rachel came out holding 2 beers. It's almost impressive, she said. She's like a villain who doesn't understand when the movie's over. She's running out of script, I said. So she's improvising. The next morning, I found Karen on the far end of the bridge with a roller in her hand. No, seriously, she was painting it. Wearing rubber gloves and an HOA volunteer vest like it gave her diplomatic immunity. What are you doing? I shouted across the creek. Restoring community aesthetics, she yelled back. We voted on this last night. You don't vote on someone else's property. Her roller clacked against the railing. Then you should have attended the meeting. I called the sheriff again. When the deputy pulled up 15 minutes later, Karen was still painting, humming cheerfully like she was on a home makeover show. The deputy told her, again, that the bridge was private. She tried to argue implied easement, whatever legal nonsense she'd Googled the night before. He finally said, Ma'am, if you don't put that roller down, I'll cite you for trespassing. She froze, paintbrush midair, then huffed and stomped back to her car, flinging the roller into the creek like a child losing a game. That night, Rachel and I sat on the porch watching the frogs by the water. She's unraveling, Rachel said. You can see it. Every time she loses control, she doubles down. I nodded. She can't stand the idea of limits. To her, boundaries are insults. The next morning, Karen retaliated the only way she knew how, through bureaucracy. She filed a community safety concern with the county zoning board claiming my bridge was dangerously close to floodplain setbacks and created noise disturbances from reflective lighting. The claim triggered yet another inspection. The county officer came by, looked at my permits, measured a few things, and said dryly, "She's wasting our time again." It was starting to feel personal. Not just an HOA feud, more like a chess match where every move cost her sanity and me patience. Then came the storm. Late August, heavy rain swept through the valley, swelling the creek again. Not as bad as before, but enough to make me nervous. I went down to the bridge to check the water level around midnight. The steel held fine. The water licked at the lower supports but didn't threaten the deck. Satisfied, I turned back toward the house, then noticed something strange. A set of headlights approaching through the rain. Karen's Audi. She stopped right at the barricade. Yes, I'd put new ones after her painting episode, and rolled down the window. I couldn't see her face through the rain, just the silhouette of her waving something. "You need to remove this," she shouted. "It's blocking community access during an emergency." "There's no emergency," I yelled back. "I just got off the phone with the HOA. We're activating the flood plan." "What flood plan?" "The one I wrote." Before I could respond, she revved the engine. "Karen, don't you dare." She hit the barricade. The metal bar clanged and bent, and for a terrifying second, I thought she was going to try the same stunt that wrecked her BMW. But the steel bridge didn't budge. She jolted forward, tires spinning, then stopped, realizing it was hopeless. The look she gave me through the windshield was pure fury, wet hair plastered to her forehead, eyes glowing in the beam of her own headlights. Then she slammed the car into reverse and sped off into the rain. I stood there shaking, half from adrenaline, half from disbelief. By morning, the whole neighborhood had heard about it. According to the gossip mill, I'd blocked community evacuation routes and endangered lives during a storm. Karen had spun the story into some grand act of civic sabotage. But this time, it backfired. The HOA board held an emergency meeting, without her. Sam filled me in later. Apparently, the board had received copies of the sheriff's trespass warnings, the paint incident report, and my stack of county permit. One of the board members, a retired lawyer, bluntly said, "She's a liability." They voted to remove her as president. When the news hit, Karen didn't take it quietly. She marched to the next meeting, demanded reinstatement, and when they refused, stormed out shouting about conspiracies. She stopped waving at neighbors, stopped walking her dog, stopped pretending civility. But just when I thought she'd finally disappear, she pulled one last desperate stunt. A week after her removal, I came home to find fresh tire tracks leading across my lawn, straight toward the creek. The bridge gate was open. On the far side, half hidden in the reeds, I saw something metallic glinting under the sun. A steel chain. Someone had tried to anchor it across the bridge, like a booby trap for my truck. The links were tight and heavy, padlocked to both rails. If I hadn't spotted it, the damage could have been serious. I called the sheriff immediately. When he saw it, his face hardened. "We'll take it from here," he said. "This isn't petty anymore. This is criminal." They questioned Karen that evening. She denied everything, of course. Said she'd been out of town visiting her sister. But witnesses saw her car parked near the trail earlier that day. For the first time, she looked nervous. Not angry. Not smug. Nervous. The deputy told me later she'd asked if tampering with private property was a felony. That's when I realized something. Beneath all that arrogance, Karen wasn't fearless. She was terrified of losing relevance, control, her little empire of rules and bylaws. The HOA replaced her officially 2 weeks later. Sam was voted in as interim president. His first act? Sending her a formal notice of behavioral review, which, in HOA language, basically meant, "You're on thin ice." The next day, she put her house up for sale. When the moving truck finally rolled out a month later, Rachel and I stood on the porch watching it disappear down the hill. "Think she'll leave the bridge alone now?" Rachel asked. "Probably," I said. "But just in case." I turned toward the bridge, patting the steel rail like an old friend. "I'll keep the cameras rolling." The water below gurgled softly, calm for once. And for the first time in months, I felt something rare in our little HOA battlefield: peace. At least, I thought it was peace. But a few weeks later, a letter arrived addressed to me, postmarked from the next county over. It wasn't from the HOA. It was from Karen. And she wasn't done yet. When I saw her name on the envelope, my first reaction wasn't anger. It was disbelief. Karen had moved away, new house, new county, a solid 20 miles of blessed distance between us. Yet here she was again, her return announced by a single envelope in her distinctive, looping handwriting that always looked like she was signing a restraining order. Rachel found me standing at the mailbox, frozen. "Please tell me that's not who I think it is," she said. "Oh, it's exactly who you think it is," I replied. The letter inside was 3 pages long, typed this time, with a bold header at the top: "Formal notice of pending civil action." My first thought was that it was another fake legal threat, Karen's specialty, but the content was unexpected. She wasn't suing me. She was warning me. It began with, "I regret how things transpired between us," which might have sounded conciliatory if it hadn't been immediately followed by, "But recent developments compel me to act in defense of our former community's interests." She claimed she'd discovered serious irregularities in the HOA's financial records after her removal, funds misallocated for unauthorized construction. In other words, she was accusing me, and, by extension, Sam, of embezzlement. I read it twice, then handed it to Rachel, who got halfway through before laughing in disbelief. "She's inventing crimes now?" "I think she's bored," I said. "And desperate." But Karen wasn't just bluffing. The following week, the county office actually reached out for clarification about our bridge funding. Someone, guess who, had filed a public complaint claiming the new bridge was illegally financed through HOA dues. Luckily, I'd paid every cent personally, and the paperwork proved it. Still, the investigation stalled my final inspection by 2 weeks, delaying the official approval for vehicle access. That's when I realized Karen wasn't trying to win anymore, she was trying to haunt me. 2 days later, an anonymous blog appeared online titled, "The Timberline Truth." It had one post: how a rogue homeowner defrauded his neighbors. It included aerial photos of my property, obviously taken by drone, and a dramatic retelling of the bridge scandal from Karen's perspective. I was portrayed as a manipulative loner who used deceit to bypass community oversight. The writing style was unmistakable, formal, self-righteous, and peppered with unnecessary legal jargon. Sam called me the next morning. "You seen this nonsense?" "Yeah," I said. "She's still got too much free time. She's posting in the neighborhood Facebook group again, too. Says she has evidence." "Let her post," I said. "Every word she writes just digs her deeper." Except, this time, Karen had backup. A new name popped up alongside hers: Dale Thompson. I didn't know him, but according to the group, he was her legal consultant. His posts were long, rambling analyses of statutory overreach and property disputes. A few residents started asking questions, and soon the HOA's new leadership was under pressure to revisit the bridge issue. It was astonishing. Karen had managed to stir up chaos after leaving. Sam called another board meeting, this time inviting me to attend so we could shut the rumor mill down properly. I went, folder in hand, with every receipt, permit, and inspection report neatly labeled. Karen wasn't physically there, but her spirit certainly was, via a printed email she'd sent to every member. The email was titled, "An Urgent Matter of Ethics." In it, she demanded an independent audit of HOA expenditures linked to private property improvements. She ended with her signature flourish. Failure to act constitutes tacit complicity. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it short. I opened my folder, slid copies of all financial records across the table, and said, "Here's every dollar, every permit, and every check. You'll find exactly 0 HOA funds anywhere in these." Sam leaned back and chuckled. "You've got a better paper trail than our treasurer." One of the board members asked, "Should we respond publicly?" I shook my head. "No. You feed her when you respond. Let her shout into the void." For a while it worked. The blog lost traction, the posts slowed, and eventually the HOA thread was locked by moderators tired of the drama. I started sleeping better, convinced the storm had finally passed. Then, one morning in early fall, Rachel came running into my workshop holding her phone. "You need to see this." It was a news article. Small local outlet. Headline: Former HOA President claims safety hazards at Timberline Creek Bridge. The photo beneath it showed a county inspector standing on my bridge. I grabbed my jacket and drove down there immediately. Sure enough, 2 county vehicles were parked nearby, orange cones around the entrance. An inspector I hadn't met before was jotting notes on a clipboard. "Morning," I said, trying to keep calm. "Can I ask what this is about?" "Anonymous complaint," he replied. "Claims the new structure violates hydrological setback limits and may obstruct emergency access." Anonymous, huh? Does it start with a K and rhyme with Baron? He smirked. "Off the record? We've gotten 3 complaints from the same email address in the past month. You might want to talk to your attorney again." I did. And this time, my lawyer wasn't amused. "She's bordering on harassment," he said. "You could file for an injunction if it continues. Document everything: emails, visits, complaints. She's leaving a trail." That night, I checked the security camera archives. The new system had multiple feeds. One from the gate, one on the bridge, and one facing the road. Around 5 a.m. that morning, a familiar Audi had pulled up, headlights off. The driver got out, walked to the bridge, and appeared to be placing something under the guardrail. Then the video cut off. Motion sensor went dark for exactly 12 seconds before resuming. My stomach dropped. I went outside with a flashlight and scanned the underside of the bridge. Nothing explosive, thankfully, but I did find a small waterproof case zip-tied to the railing. Inside was a GoPro camera, battery dead, memory card missing. That was the night I stopped laughing about Karen. I turned the footage over to the sheriff. They opened another case file, and the deputy promised to have a conversation with her. But what could they really do? She hadn't technically broken in, and proving intent would take more than speculation. Still, the message was clear. She wasn't just trying to ruin my reputation now. She was watching me. Rachel wanted to move. "Let her have the HOA," she said. "Let her rule it from a distance like some ghost dictator." "I'm not moving because of her," I said. "She's already taken enough space in my life." That night, I sat on the porch with the lights off, watching the bridge shimmer under the moonlight. For the first time, it didn't feel like my bridge anymore. It felt like bait, something she'd left there as a reminder that I was never fully free. A week later, I got a call from Sam. "You might want to sit down," he said. "You remember that guy, Dale Thompson? Her so-called legal consultant." "Yeah. What about him?" "He's not a lawyer. County records show he's her boyfriend. He's been emailing the HOA pretending to represent her. And guess what? They're both living in a rental cabin 2 miles upriver." I laughed, but it came out hollow. "So she moved closer?" "Technically, yeah. Other side of the creek." That was the final twist in her madness. She hadn't left. She'd relocated just far enough to stay legally outside the HOA, while still close enough to keep me in her crosshairs. 2 days later, I found proof. A new drone hovering over my backyard, camera glinting in the sunlight. I aimed my phone at it, recording. The drone darted away, but not before circling the bridge one last time. That night, I emailed my lawyer again. File the injunction. I'm done playing. It took a week, but the judge granted it. A restraining order prohibiting Karen or any affiliates from surveilling, photographing, or entering my property. The order was clear and enforceable. I had it laminated and posted on the bridge like a trophy. For a few days there was silence. No drones, no letters, no complaints. The water in the creek was low and clear again, the weather mild. Rachel and I went out for dinner to celebrate, toasting to the end of an exhausting saga. When we came home, though, something felt off. The porch light was out. The air smelled faintly of burned plastic. I walked down toward the bridge, and saw a small patch of charred wood near the edge of the decking. Someone had tried to light it on fire. Small, contained, but deliberate. I turned toward the road and saw a pair of headlights disappearing into the night. I didn't need to see the driver to know who it was. That was the moment I stopped underestimating Karen Dempsey. And I realized something much worse. She wasn't obsessed with the bridge anymore. She was obsessed with me. The morning after the burn mark appeared, I didn't sleep. I didn't even try. I sat on the porch with a cup of cold coffee and watched the bridge, waiting for dawn to break like I was guarding a battlefield. Rachel came out around 7, still in her robe, eyes heavy. "You've been out here all night," she said. "If she wanted to scare you, it's working." I shook my head. "It's not fear. It's calculation. She's escalating again, one step away from making a mistake big enough to end this. Because that's what Karen did. She didn't just cross lines, she sprinted past them until the law caught up. Every time she lost control, she reached for a bigger stunt. And I had a feeling she was gearing up for her biggest one yet. By noon, I had the sheriff's office at my property again. The deputy, the same one who'd been dealing with Karen's chaos since the BMW incident, crouched over the scorched boards, scribbling note. "Looks like lighter fluid," he said. "She didn't pour much. Probably meant it as a warning." Rachel muttered, "Of course she did." I asked if we could press charges. "You can," the deputy said. "But without footage of her doing it, it's your word against hers." That was all the motivation I needed. I spent the next 3 hours installing 2 new security cameras. One hidden in the solar post light, another under the bridge itself, infrared and motion activated. I even mounted a third one disguised as a birdhouse in the oak tree across the creek. If Karen wanted to play spy games, I was going to win. That night, Rachel stayed inside while I worked in the garage. Around 11, I heard something strange, a faint splash, like someone wading in shallow water. I killed the lights and looked out the window. The moon was half hidden by clouds, but I could make out a silhouette near the bridge. Someone moving low, careful. I opened the live feed on my phone. There she was. Karen, flashlight off, crouched by the guardrail. She was holding something small, maybe a wrench, maybe a screwdriver. My pulse spiked. I hit record. Then came a metallic clink, the sound of bolts being loosened. She was trying to sabotage the railing. Maybe to make it look unsafe again, maybe to prove her theory that the bridge was defective. Either way, she was committing a felony on camera. I didn't yell. I didn't run outside. I just dialed the sheriff's number and said quietly, "She's here again. And I've got her on video this time." They arrived in under 10 minutes. The red and blue lights broke through the night like salvation. Karen froze mid-action, caught between the flashlight beam and her own arrogance. "Ma'am," the deputy called out, "put the tool down and step away from the bridge." Her voice cracked, high-pitched and trembling. "I was inspecting damage. It's a public hazard." "It's not public," I said, stepping out of the shadows. "And it's not damaged, until you started tampering with it." She glared at me like I'd betrayed her. "You think you can just own everything, don't you? The bridge, the neighborhood, people." The deputy cuffed her before she could finish. She didn't resist. She just stared at the ground, muttering, "You'll regret this. Everyone will." They charged her with trespassing, vandalism, and violating the restraining order. She was booked and released on bail the next morning, but this time there were consequences. Real ones. The county prosecutor filed a misdemeanor case. Her name hit the local paper again. Former HOA president arrested for trespassing. I thought that would finally end it. For a while, it seemed like it had. The blog disappeared, the drones stopped, and the quiet felt almost eerie. Weeks passed without a word from her. Rachel started smiling again. We invited Sam and his wife over for dinner, celebrated what we hoped was the final chapter of The Karen Chronicles. But one evening, as we were clearing dishes, Sam got a text. His expression darkened. "You're not gonna like this," he said, showing me his phone. It was a screenshot from the HOA Facebook group. A new account had appeared. No name, just a profile photo of a gray cat, and it was posting long paragraphs about community corruption, sabotaged infrastructure, and dangerous residents with connections at the county office. The writing style was unmistakable. "She's back," Rachel whispered. But this time, Karen wasn't reckless. She was methodical. The posts never mentioned me by name, but they hinted at a certain homeowner whose bridge collapse was never fully investigated. Neighbors started whispering again, uneasy. A few even avoided me at the grocery store. Karen was doing what she did best, poisoning the well without leaving fingerprints. I tried ignoring it, but ignoring Karen was like ignoring termites. You don't see the damage until it's too late. Then, one morning, I found a small envelope wedged under my door. Inside was a flash drive. No note, no label. Against better judgment, I plugged it into my laptop. It contained 20 video clips, security camera footage from my property. My property. From angles my own cameras didn't cover. She had planted hidden cameras somewhere around the bridge. My stomach dropped as I scrolled through the files. Most were harmless shots of me working outside or crossing the bridge, but one clip caught me off guard. Rachel and I arguing one night on the porch. The audio was muffled, but it was clear enough to recognize our voices. Rachel saw it over my shoulder and went pale. "She's been spying on us." That was the breaking point. I drove straight to the sheriff's office with the flash drive. The deputy's expression hardened as he watched a few seconds of footage. "This isn't just harassment anymore," he said. "This is stalking." They got a search warrant for her rental cabin that same day. What they found there still makes my skin crawl. Inside her small office, police discovered a wall covered in printed photos. Of me, of Rachel, of our house. Red string connected different images like some twisted investigation board. There were folders labeled access routes, bridge structural weakness, and, disturbingly, behavior patterns. She'd even printed my LinkedIn profile, underlining words like engineer and strategic. Apparently, she'd been watching us for months, planning something, though what, exactly, no one knew. When the news broke, it hit the neighborhood like a thunderclap. Even her former supporters went silent. The rental lease was terminated immediately. The county pressed charges again, this time for criminal surveillance. But here's the thing about people like Karen. Even when cornered, they find a way to twist the narrative. She showed up at her arraignment in a crisp blazer, speaking to the press like she was the victim of character assassination. She claimed the cameras were for public safety monitoring, and that I'd fabricated evidence to silence a whistleblower. My lawyer told me not to comment publicly, so I didn't. But I did something better. At the next HOA meeting, yes, I actually attended for once, I brought a portable projector and played a few clips from the footage she'd taken. The silence in that room was absolute. Every resident saw the extent of her obsession. When the final clip ended, I turned to them and said simply, "This is what happens when control becomes pathology." Even the most gossip-hungry neighbors looked ashamed. Karen's trial date was set for late November. The judge issued a restraining order stronger than before, extending to all electronic surveillance. She was banned from owning or operating drones, cameras, or recording devices near residential zones. It should have felt like victory. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt hollow. Because every time I looked at the bridge now, I didn't see the craftsmanship or the peace I'd built into it. I saw every confrontation, every insult, every sleepless night replayed in wood and steel. It had become a monument to obsession, hers and maybe mine. Rachel said it best one evening. She wanted to own the neighborhood, she said softly. And you wanted to outsmart her. Neither of you ever stopped building walls. She wasn't wrong. In early December, a freak cold snap froze the creek solid. For the first time in years, the bridge stood over still water. I walked out there one night, snow crunching under my boots, and leaned on the rail. The air was so quiet it felt like the world was holding its breath. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text. It read, "You think it's over? Bridges can burn twice." No name. No traceable number. But I didn't need either. I looked out at the frozen water, at the reflection of the bridge in the ice, and realized something horrifying. Karen might have been physically gone, but her reach wasn't. Somewhere, somehow, she was still watching. And deep down, I knew Chapter 7 hadn't just started. It had been waiting all along. The text haunted me. Bridges can burn twice. It replayed in my head like a song stuck on loop, except every repetition felt heavier. Rachel wanted me to ignore it, block the number, let the police handle it, but ignoring Karen never worked. She thrived in shadows, in the spaces where no one challenged her version of the story. And now, even after being charged, even after the restraining orders, she'd found a new way to crawl back into my life. I handed the message to the sheriff the next morning. The deputy frowned, tapped the phone screen, and said, "It's from a burner. Could be her. Could be anyone she's convinced to do her dirty work." "She's got followers?" I asked. He sighed. "You'd be surprised how often people like her find an audience. They paint themselves as victims of a conspiracy, and suddenly there's a handful of strangers eager to help." That chilled me more than the message itself. Karen didn't even need to be here to make trouble anymore. She could outsource her obsession. That night, I checked every camera feed twice before bed. The bridge was quiet. The creek had thawed just enough to whisper again, a slow trickle under the moonlight. Rachel said she wanted to visit her sister for a few days, just to breathe. I didn't argue. She deserved peace, even if I had to stay and guard the chaos. The next evening, I noticed something off. A light flickering across the creek where Karen's old rental used to be. I hadn't paid attention to who'd moved in since she'd been evicted, but seeing that faint glow made me uneasy. When I zoomed in on the camera feed, I could make out a figure moving near the trees. Tall, broad-shouldered, definitely not Karen. But something about the way they kept stopping to look toward my property sent my pulse racing. The following morning, I drove around the other side of the creek to see for myself. The cabin looked empty except for a dark pickup truck parked behind it. No plates. Windows tinted. I didn't stick around long. By afternoon, I had my lawyer file an update with the court. Possible third-party involvement. The police increased patrols, promising to check in near my property every few nights. For a few days it was quiet. Too quiet. Then came the smoke. It was just after midnight when the fire alarm screamed. I bolted upright, heart hammering. Rachel wasn't home, thank God, but the air already reeked of burning wood. I ran downstairs and grabbed the extinguisher, following the haze to the porch. Flames licked at the far end of the railing, my railing, right where the bridge began. I charged outside, spraying foam until the flames hissed and died. The wood was scorched but intact. Someone had doused the spot in gasoline and lit it again. The second burn. I didn't even call 911. I called the deputy directly. He arrived within 15 minutes, headlights bouncing off the wet gravel. When he saw the blackened boards, he cursed under his breath. Same MO. Accelerant poured from a small container. Footprints, too. Looks like men's boots this time. "She's not alone," I said. He nodded grimly. "We'll pull traffic cam footage from the highway. Maybe the pickup shows up." While they took samples, I reviewed my camera footage. The feed caught a shadow crossing the bridge at 12:03 a.m., not Karen. This person moved differently, deliberate, slower. But at one point, the head tilted just enough for the light to catch a shape I recognized. The same gray hoodie Karen had worn the night she was arrested. Either she was back, or someone was copying her. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. A new text. It's poetic, isn't it? Fire cleanses. I forwarded it to the deputy, who said they'd track the burner but warned it might take time. By now, word had spread through the neighborhood again. Sam stopped by, face tight with worry. "You want me to stay tonight?" he asked. I shook my head. "No. If she's watching, I don't want anyone else in her crosshairs." He hesitated. "You think she's really come back?" "I think she never left in her mind." The next night, I didn't sleep. I set up camp on the porch, lights off, shotgun resting across my lap. Not because I wanted to use it, but because I wanted to feel like I could. Around 2 in the morning, I heard the faint crunch of tires on gravel. Not close, but near enough to raise every hair on my neck. I turned on the camera monitor. A vehicle had stopped at the far end of the road. No headlights, just a faint outline of a truck. Then the engine cut. For nearly 20 minutes, nothing moved. Then, 2 small flashes of light like someone taking photos. That's when I made my move. I grabbed my phone, started recording, and quietly slipped around the side path that led to the back fence. The moonlight was faint, but it was enough to see a figure standing at the tree line, camera in hand. The same height, same stance, Karen's. She was wearing the hoodie again, but her hair glinted silver under the light. She'd cut it short. "Karen," I called out. She froze. Then slowly turned toward me. "You're breaking the order again," I said. "You need to leave." Her voice cracked, hoarse and strange. "It's not yours. It never was. Go home." "I am home," she whispered. "You stole it from me." That sentence chilled me more than the cold air. There was something hollow in her tone, something gone beyond anger. When I reached for my phone to call the sheriff, she bolted, back across the creek, vanishing into the trees. The only sound left was the slow ripple of water. By the time the police arrived, she was gone again. But this time, she hadn't come empty-handed. In the morning, I found another letter pinned to the bridge post with a nail. It read, "If I can't have it, no one will." The deputy told me it was enough to upgrade the restraining order to a full no-contact order with an emergency warrant for her arrest. They circulated her photo to surrounding counties, but she vanished like smoke. Days passed. Then weeks. No texts, no calls, no sightings. The quiet returned, but it wasn't peace. It was the silence before a storm. In mid-January, Rachel came back home. The snow was melting again, the creek swelling into that familiar restless rhythm. I tried to act normal, tried to convince her, and myself, that the danger was over. We talked about selling the place, maybe moving somewhere without HOAs or bridges or memories. But every time we started packing, something inside me resisted. I couldn't let Karen's insanity chase me from my own land. And then, on the last night before we were supposed to list the house, it happened. The storm rolled in just before midnight, wind howling, rain hammering the deck. I went out to check the creek levels, flashlight cutting through the mist. That's when I saw movement again. A figure, standing in the middle of the bridge, drenched and still. For a moment I thought it was a trick of the light. Then she lifted her head. Karen. She looked different. Pale, hollow-eyed, soaked through but strangely calm. Her voice carried through the rain. "It's over now," she said. "The bridge was never yours. It was ours." "Karen," I said slowly, "go home. Please." She shook her head. "I am." Before I could take another step, she stepped backward toward the center. There was a loud crack, a bolt giving way under stress. The railing shuddered. I lunged forward, but she slipped on the wet planks, lost her balance, and plunged into the raging creek below. The water swallowed her instantly. I called 911, screaming over the storm, pointing rescuers downstream. They found her car abandoned at the roadside but never found her body. The creek was fast and deep that night, swollen by weeks of rain. The official report called it accidental drowning. But I knew better. Karen had written her ending the same way she lived, dramatic, defiant, and convinced she was right. A month later, I stood on that bridge again. The county sealed off the area temporarily while they reinforced the railings, but they let me through one last time. I leaned over the edge, staring at the water rushing beneath. The creek was calm again, reflecting the pale morning sky. Rachel joined me quietly. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "I think so. You could tear it down, you know. Start fresh." I smiled faintly. "No. It stays. After everything? It's not just a bridge anymore. It's proof that some things survive even when everything around them burns." We walked back toward the house, hand in hand. The air smelled like new rain and cedar, the scent of something finally cleansed. A few weeks later, the insurance company called to finalize the claims. The adjuster mentioned that someone had tried to reach out about joint ownership records. I asked for the name. He said the caller used an alias but left an email. Karen Dempsey Foundation at protonmail.com. I laughed quietly. Rachel asked why. "She's still trying to control the story," I said. "Then what are you going to do?" "Finish it," I said. "And move on." That evening, I uploaded all my footage. The cameras, the court documents, the emails, and sent them anonymously to a local journalist who'd once covered the case. I didn't want revenge. I wanted the truth to exist somewhere beyond my backyard, in the open air where she couldn't twist it anymore. A week later, the article went live. The HOA war that ended in a tragedy. It was fair, balanced, and, most importantly, honest. It ended with a line I hadn't written but could've. Control can make anyone a villain, but letting go makes you human again. Months passed. The bridge stayed standing. No more letters, no more fires, no more ghosts in the dark. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear the creek whispering through the beams, like a voice carried on the current. And sometimes, just sometimes, I answer back. Not in anger. Not in fear. Just to say I'm still here. And the bridge still stands.